thank you everybody for joining today. We're going to look at building a SCOM connector for yourself, in this case for ServiceNow. All the principles and sort of approach we're going to use will be completely applicable to any other thing other than sort of ServiceNow, which is what we're going to be building this connector for. We're going to look at some of the pros and cons as to why you might look at building versus buying, or the other way around. But let's first set the stage with a few slides and say hello myself. So I'm Bruce Cullen, I'm the Director of Products here at Cookdown, and I'll be with you for this webinar. So let's start with why bother? Why connect SCOM and ServiceNow? SCOM has alerts that come out of it, and those are perfectly actionable. Do you need to connect it to ServiceNow or any other product? The answer very quickly becomes apparent when you try to work with those email alerts. They're all right. There's a lot you can do with email, but there's some big drawbacks as well. One thing to also highlight is how people are currently interacting with your ITSM products, ServiceNow. It's usually like this, people entering incidents effectively manually into ServiceNow and putting them in the right place so they're picked up by the right team. Now, in some companies that we've come across, this is someone's job to manually enter incidents into ServiceNow for things that SCOM will tell you about. So it's quite a logical place to slot in SCOM. So you'd replace the manual piece with SCOM, and then SCOM's alerts, or at least the ones that kind of make sense and are actionable, you would route programmatically to the right place. So logically, this makes sense because you're saving a whole bunch of time and effort for somebody who would otherwise have to manually do this. Also, because this is being done programmatically, you can make more sensible decisions around how things could be routed. So that's kind of the why. The other big piece of why is this one. If your primary method for consuming SCOM alerts is the humble inbox, very soon you'll end up with a very full inbox of unread email, which is a real shame because obviously SCOM's alerts are only valuable if you actually look at them and take action based on them. Unread emails equals unactioned alerts, and obviously unactioned alerts means there is no value to be gained there. What is the point? I bet you it's not the same as you'll find with your ITSM products. So how's this for an idea? Let's make alerts into incidents. So these slides, in the spirit of kind of full disclosure, I've taken directly from a sales pitch for one of our sold products, because all of the reasons why you want to connect SCOM and ServiceNow or any ITSM tool are the same, regardless of whether you build something or buy it. It's the same problem you're trying to solve and the same justification and the same reasons for wanting to connect these worlds up. But today we're going to look at actually how you go about building something yourself. So what this looks like really in practice is a good old-fashioned PowerShell script in between SCOM and ServiceNow to do all the heavy lifting for us. And that's what we're going to do. So a few pieces are involved in doing this. So to start with, we need to auth with ServiceNow from SCOM. We need to get all of our SCOM alerts from the SDK itself, which we will then be converting into the JSON format. And that's because ServiceNow is expecting them in that format. We're going to be pushing these alerts directly into the incident table in ServiceNow. And that's what we're going to be doing, all via PowerShell. So only 5 minutes of slides this time. We're going to dig straight now into a demo, which is where I need this. So the first thing we're going to start with is ServiceNow. I'm going to start by requesting a blank ServiceNow development instance, which is what you're staring at right now. This is the ServiceNow developers portal, which will allow me to provision a blank ServiceNow instance meant for developing ServiceNow bits and pieces. It takes, it says there, only a few seconds. It doesn't take that long at all. And I'll have a blank instance I can log into, and then I can start fiddling with it. And I'm doing this, from the point of literally nothing, just to show you I'm not there's no smoke and mirrors here. It is actually easy to get going with and to push SCOM alerts up into ServiceNow using PowerShell from the SDK. So we'll just wait for this to go through. It does typically take a few seconds, not usually this many, or I would have pre-done this. And if it takes a bit longer, we'll start by looking at PowerShell and then come back to this piece. Okay, it's going to take a few more seconds. Fine. So the first thing in PowerShell I'm going to do is I'm on a sort of jump box effectively. So I'm going to run this script here. which will connect me to the SCOM SDK on my SCOM server, and it needs some credentials for me to do that. Which, there we go. So now I'm connected to the SCOM SDK. I'm just going to really check I'm actually connected correctly. I've got the SCOM commandlets. If I go get SCOM management group, I should see the management group I'm expecting in the return, which is SCOM 19, which is there. So great, I've got what I'm expecting. So I'm connected to SCOM. That's really cool. And then the next thing we need is our scripts to actually send alerts up to SCOM, which is here. And now this is where I need my blank ServiceNow instance. Let's give it a little refresh and see if they lie about a few seconds or not. When I did this before, while preparing for this webinar, it did genuinely only take a few seconds. But not to fear if it takes a bit longer. There's things we could do first, like explain the PowerShell script. So let's have a look, because ideally I'd just plug in the details of the ServiceNow instance that's being provisioned for me into my PowerShell script to get going with. So let's wait for this to load. Oh, it's taking too long. All right, into the script then. So this is the script I'm actually going to use to send over SCOM alerts. So to start with, we put our credentials into a variable. We're going to be using the admin credentials for ServiceNow for this one, just because it's a demo. In production, you would use roles guarded user account that has permissions to the incident table and to create incidents and not much else. We need to then build our auth headers, which is the next bunch of stuff, which from kind of line 5 down to line 12. And then we specify our endpoint. This is our ServiceNow instance. This number here is what I'm waiting for from that web page that I'm refreshing. We're going to be doing a post rather than anything else. We need to tell the script to use TLS 1.2. This is a really key point that has scuppered me on numerous occasions in the past. ServiceNow, as of probably about a year ago now, will not let you auth with it unless you connect using TLS 1.2. And by default, Windows doesn't use TLS 1.2, so you have to force it to do so. Then we are going to get all of the SCOM alerts using this command, get SCOM alert. This is all of the SCOM alerts from my management group. You can look at refining this if you so choose. And we're going to pick out a few specific properties from those alerts, which we're going to use. We're looking at the name and description, essentially. And those are going into the description and short description field of incidents. And then essentially, for each of the alerts in our $alerts variable, which is this, we're going to iterate through this loop of getting the name and the description. We're going to convert those alerts to JSON. We're then going to invoke a REST method, so the actual post, the actual push, and everything is then held in our variables, basically from the above, from the headers to the ServiceNow credentials to, well, the whole thing. So it should just be a case of I plop in here, whoops, the ServiceNow instance and hit go, and we'll go from there. Hooray, good. So I have a start building button, so they've provisioned me a ServiceNow instance. And my ServiceNow instance URL is giving me this dev instance here. So this should load me something, which it is. That's cool. We'll put that in there. The other thing we need is our admin credentials. So start building is directly connecting me through, which is great. But what I actually need is from my email, which I've annoyingly closed, I need the admin credentials, which they will email to me. Or I could create a blank user, so we'll see. Oh, hang on, it's launching Outlook on the wrong machine. I want it on my local machine, not on the RDP jump box. Okay. Bear with me while I get this. The other thing we'll do while I'm finding the credentials is in this ServiceNow instance, we're going to go to the incident table and we're going to clear it out. With all dev instances, they give you a bunch of dummy data, and I don't want to see any of that dummy data, so I'm going to go configure table, and I'm going to clear everything out. So at the bottom of every ServiceNow table, at the bottom of the columns section, if I scroll down when it's finished loading, you'll see a link somewhere where you can delete everything. delete all records. There it is. And they ask you to type the word delete, which is obviously foolproof. And all of the records in this table will be deleted. And while that's going through, here is the email in which they've emailed me my admin password, which obviously I need. So this is obviously in clear text. So while I'm doing this webinar, please don't use these credentials because you'll break my demo. And if you're watching this on replay, this dev instance will be long gone. So there we go. Great. So we've cleared all of the incidents from the incident table now in ServiceNow. This is just basically to show I'm not, faking anything up. This is now an empty table of incidents. And if I go to my PowerShell script, in here, all we specify as far as credentials are concerned is the username, which is in $user here. And we ask for the password when the script runs. So if I now hit run script, I don't think I made any changes. It will ask me for the password, which is in my clipboard. And hopefully when I hit go, the script is going. So in theory, if I go back into ServiceNow and hit F5, the incidents, there we go, are starting to come in. And these are clearly from SCOM, just in the looks of them. Let's just look into one to see what they've got in them. Although obviously I already know because it's in the script. The short description and the description field are filled in from those SCOM alerts. So that was actually really rather easy to do. So as far as a demo is concerned, I'm going to struggle to fill 45 minutes because that's the vast majority of what there is to see. That script is relatively easy. The things that are more sort of the most complicated pieces about it, apart from just generally PowerShell syntaxing, are building your headers and iterating through all the alerts in this loop here. So relatively simple to get going with. So at that point, I'm going to jump back to slides and start to go through some of the cases where it's not quite so simple. So as you've seen, getting going is really easy. So if you want to filter what is sent up from SCOM, you have to come up with PowerShell incantations to do so. Obviously, if you want to handle anything to do with SCOM alerts being updated, you have to come up with logic there, because what I've cooked up really quickly will just funnel up all SCOM alerts. If a SCOM alert changes state, it will get funneled up like a new one, so we'll raise a new incident. So some logic that will, update SCOM, handle updates to SCOM alerts and not always create a new incident. Some level of routing, so the incidents are routed to the right place based on what's in those alerts. Logic would need to be built for that. Where things get really difficult is if you want any incident information back in SCOM or any, automation here. So you've got your incident up in ServiceNow, it gets resolved, and you want the SCOM alert that triggered it to get closed off, or you want the incident ID or who it's assigned to or whatever back in SCOM. This is where things are starting to get a bit more tricky. Any updates to incidents then, if you've got sort of bidirectional sync in there, so an incident moves between state new to state in progress and gets assigned to somebody different or whatever, putting those updates back into SCOM is more tricky. And then obviously handling alert storms can be problematic. We all know that the classic SCOM alert storm problem of a flapping port can result in loads and loads of SCOM alerts for something relatively benign. With a simple PowerShell script, they're all sent up, and so they'll all result as in incidents being raised, which isn't necessarily what you want. Which handling alerts and that's open and close quickly, I've already effectively talked about. So there's loads of areas where it's not as simple as a simple PowerShell script, even though to get going is relatively simple. But the good news is that there is another way, which is the place that I stole those initial slides for and why connect the two products. We sell a product called Alert Sync, which is all about creating ServiceNow incidents from SCOM alerts that handles all of the bits and pieces you would otherwise have to build. There's many reasons why, the classic build it versus buy it debate, where there are pros and cons to each side. But typically with buying it, you've got the initial outlay, but once you've bought that product, things become a lot simpler for you because you haven't got all the issues with sort of maintenance and the like. So conceptually, Alert Sync, this is how it works. SCOM alerts are raised. When stuff goes wrong, they're sent across to our ServiceNow certified store app and are stored as alert records. These are then matched against rules in our app that determine when an incident is raised or not. So you don't have to worry about filtering stuff from SCOM, although there is a mechanism for doing so if you don't want to send up everything. So not everything is raised as an incident. You can also raise things other than incidents, like tasks, for example. But those incidents and tasks are ultimately not going to be static. They're going to be worked on. People will be assigned to them. There'll be notes put on them. They'll move through various states. That information is pushed back through the alert record and back into SCOM. So you can see with bidirectional sync exactly what's going on. And in the case of the classic alert storm case, there's a good example of one we handle quite nicely. So picture this scene. You have a bunch of Windows servers running things hosted on a hypervisor. And the hypervisor goes down. What's SCOM going to do if it's monitoring all of the bits and pieces on their servers? Yes, you guessed it. It's going to light up like a Christmas tree. You'll get alerts for everything, not just the fact the servers are down, but all of the bits of monitoring for what's running on those servers. And rightly so, that's what SCOM is designed to do. But how many of those things do you actually want as incidents in ServiceNow? I'd be willing to suggest it's not all of them. It will be a subset. I will go further and say it's probably only this one. You care about the fact the server is down. All of the other SCOM alerts, you know the cause for them is going to be the server is down. So why raise them as incidents? That just work for somebody to have to process. Alert Sync has a single checkbox in it that will handle this case. I'll show you it in a second. That is where I will jump back to my demo box, which is finally finished sending off all those SCOM alerts and show you what Alert Sync actually looks like in practice. So because this is the first screen that's loaded, the first thing I'll show you here is sort of bidirectional sync. So I keep mentioning incident information in SCOM. So here we have in the fields in SCOM information about our incidents that this has been raised as. So this machine is switched off. It's our demo lab. It's been switched off for quite a long time, as you can see. This heartbeat failure alert has been pushed across to ServiceNow. It's got this incident ID. It's assigned to a guy called Malcolm Tucker. It's currently on hold. The assignment group is the incident management group. We've got the CI here and the business service as well. All of the fields you see here are customizable. So if you want to push different things into different places, you can do so. But this is kind of what I'm talking about when I speak of bidirectional sync. There isn't really a great deal to see in SCOM, but that's part of the power. It's a management pack you import into SCOM and a ServiceNow certified store app. In SCOM, you put run as credentials, run as accounts in here using SCOM standard run as configuration stuff here. You also use a resource pool, which we set up when we import the MP, that automatically has all of the management servers that make up your management group in there. So basically you get HA out of the box, another classic hard to build one. How do you build a PowerShell script that deals with a management server going down? Because it's probably running on that management server. And then maintaining it when stuff changes. Difficult. But SCOM's dealt with that stuff out of the box and our product uses it. So there we go. We then use an internal connector. These things here that actually push the SCOM alerts up into ServiceNow and handle the updates as well. And from here you can choose what gets sent. So you don't have to send everything from SCOM. And again, this is all UI driven. So you can choose to send everything from your management group or a subset just for specific groups. You can choose to send everything from the perspective of targets or target a specific management pack only, for example. And then you have your criteria. So in my lab, I've got everything checked apart from SCOM alert resolution state, where I'm only sending alerts in the state raise incidents, just as a way of filtering it and meaning that not all the SCOM alerts are always up there, because that makes for a poor demo. What else is there to show? There are checkboxes for various bits and pieces, like the ability to reset monitors where incidents close, because you can't obviously close off SCOM alerts in some cases, in some versions of SCOM, without resetting the monitor, and then recursing dependency and aggregate monitors to do that same thing for dependency and aggregate monitors. I won't go through all of these checkboxes, but essentially a few of the settings. Going now into ServiceNow, my other tab, Oh, have I closed it? No, I haven't. Here we go. This is my other ServiceNow instance, which is my production one, cookdown.servicenow.com. In here I have my ServiceNow certified store app, and we're looking at SCOM alerts here that have been pushed across from SCOM using the MP. So these are evaluated against our creation rules here. These are the things that govern when an incident is raised or not. So you can make these as granular as you like, and the whole idea of these is these also deal with routing. So saying when a SCOM alert matches these conditions, send it to this team, that kind of thing is all here. So this one, for example, is for the SQL team. The conditions that an incoming alert would need to match are here. So basically they need to look SQL-y, essentially. As far as the operators you can choose from, we've got all the sort of obvious ones like starts with or contains or whatever, but you've also got the ability to do regular expressions and pattern matching, which is cool, and you can and all these things together as you so choose. But basically in my lab it has to look like SQL and it has to not be closed. In those cases, what do we do? Well, in this case we're going to raise an incident. There are some cases where you might not want to do this. You might want to raise a task. For example, I don't know, disk space is low. Disk space is low isn't truly an incident by ITIL's definitions. That is truly a task. Free up some disk space. But it's a valid SCOM alert and something you can take action on. So in those cases, you might want to raise a task. But anyway, in this case, I'm raising an incident. You can see here all the fields that we're filling in and what we're filling them in with. These are all obviously, drop downs that you can set or look up fields. If you have our CMDB population product, we can also map the correct CI, another one that's really tricky to do with PowerShell, in script form. And if we don't find a match, then you can specify a fallback item and then the all-important assignment group. So I want my SQL alerts to go to the SQL team. So there we go. That's where that is provided. And you can actually specify a specific assignee if you so choose. We've seen this used by a couple of customers, but usually it's for the edge cases rather than for the majority of working with incidents. The other thing to say on this is one thing that's kind of rigid with having a drop-down list is cases where you don't necessarily want this value in all cases and don't want to create loads and loads of rules. So in this case, setting impact low and urgency low will make sense for some SQL alerts, but not for all. I've got two approaches to tackling this problem. The first is to create loads of incident creation rules for each of the cases, which is obviously not palatable. The second is to use post-creation processing, which is essentially a JavaScript advanced option that will effectively run after everything from this first tab has been enacted on the incident you'll be creating. So here you can see our example script where we use SCOM alert severity on priority to set the incident's impact and urgency. So it's a bit more dynamic, and this is what we recommend people do. And this is all held in JavaScript. Obviously, because this is a JavaScript, if you want to build any other custom logic, this is where that stuff would go. What can you do with this? Well, what would you like to do with this? It's JavaScript. It's really, really powerful. Pretty much all possible. So on the Advanced tab then, we have the ability to correlate server down alerts, which was one of my slides just before we went into this demo piece here. Where if we detect that a server is down, we don't want incidents for all of the subsequent SCOM alerts. As soon as we pick up on that, heartbeat failure or failed to connect, we know the server is down. So we'll suppress creation of incidents until that server is back up, if this box is checked. Then we have the ability here to do something with the incident where the SCOM alert closes. So let's say when the SCOM alert closes, we want to automatically resolve the incident. That's how you would specify this. And then we have some more scripty options. I mentioned when we were looking at those SCOM alerts in the SCOM console, looking at things that we pulled back through like alert ID, like incident ID and who they're assigned to. It's in this script that you would customize what goes where. Let's say you've already used custom field 1 of alerts for something, and you want to put the assignment group in custom field 5 instead. That's a relatively easy change to make. Or if you wanted a different incident property other than the assignment group, for example. You'd do all that stuff here. There's another advanced case for updates to the incident based on what happens with SCOM alerts. So this was typically used in older versions of Alert Sync for resolving the incident where the SCOM alert closes, but we now have a drop down, this thing here, for that. So what we've seen this used for is not much in practice. Occasionally customers use this for doing things with the incident where the SCOM alert goes into different states, like assigned to engineering, or usually custom states rather than out of the box states. Again, it's JavaScript, so if you have some other use case I haven't thought of, you can build it all here, and it's really powerful. And that's basically the rules. They're run from priority 1 down to highest number you can think of. Oh, there is one other rule to show you, which is my wait rule here at the top. So in my lab, I'm holding back all alerts where alert ID is not empty, so in other words, all SCOM alerts, for a period of 1 minute with my wait rule, which is a different type of rule. This is really helpful for handling those flapping alert cases, and because you can specify specific conditions for those flapping alerts, if you know network monitoring typically would generate those flapping port alerts, that you might want a rule for only those things. You can create conditions to let you only hold back alerts that match that pattern. And in this case, a SCOM alert coming in is held back for 1 minute before being evaluated against the rest of the rules. Which is really, really useful, because then if your rules, like my SQL one I showed you earlier, has the condition of alert, SCOM alert is not closed, and then we're not going to raise incidents for SCOM alerts that open and close quickly. Happy days. The final thing to show you, if I go through to SCOM alerts, is of course the incidents, which are really important. So let's look at one. Oh, and I've forgotten all the properties of the SCOM alerts as well. So this is a SCOM alert sent across, so you can see all the properties here we've sent across. We also have properties of the object, that's the monitored object essentially, from the more obvious ones like what's its name through to less obvious ones like its SCOM object ID and the parents of this object. These are really, really useful for correlation essentially, because when we do CMDB population, we'll push across the SCOM object ID, and we'll go through this monitoring object parent IDs list, which goes from most specific object to least specific, and we do this until we can find a match. So in some cases, the SCOM object model doesn't match the one you'd want to see in ServiceNow, so you wouldn't want all the SCOM objects in ServiceNow, or you may just be getting around to building out your CMDB. It's a good way of making sure you have a CI set in ServiceNow for your incidents. We also have all of the information about the monitoring configurations. This is everything from the management group to specific management packs. So you can use all of these properties when creating your rules. Quite useful for if anything comes from the SQL management pack routed to the SQL team, or separating dev management groups from prod ones, that kind of thing. In the history tab, you can see it's SCOM alerts flow through all the rules. So in this one, you can see, for example, this one's flowed through my wait rule before being assigned to my generic infrastructure rule. And then ultimately, the rule that was hit was my generic infrastructure rule. And the incident that was raised was this one. Let's have a look at it. So all of the properties you would expect to be filled in are indeed filled in. Yeah, not much to really say about this. It does what you would expect. There's a link under the covers back to the SCOM alert, which you can expose in the tabs. But this would only make sense to do if you're fine with there being no link where an incident is raised manually or has come from another place. But yeah, that's basically how Alert Sync works, and some of the cases where it would make sense to look at something like this rather than building the PowerShell version, or of course building the PowerShell version. Just to go back to slides really briefly before we end, a quick quote from a customer So Alert Sync has saved us at least 12 hours of manual effort in incident creation every week. Every week, that's a lot of time. And has been an excellent replacement for Avanios. This is from Gift of Hope, from their infrastructure and operations manager, David Young. So all that's left to say is next time we will be focusing on the 6th of April at 3 p.m. I say BST. Will we be in BST by then? Maybe we will, actually. Anyway, on the 6th of April, we'll be looking at EasyTune. I'll be taking you through a brief introduction to it and how it can make alert tuning easy. It's a free product that we make. If you're interested, go and register at this address or just go to cookdown.com. The registration details are there as well. So thank you very much for watching. You can find everything we've gone through on our website. You will do. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, and of course via good old-fashioned email. So as I mentioned, the bits and pieces I've shared today I'll make available on our website, on the blog, including the PowerShell scripts. So you can have a play with it yourself, and of course everything about Alert Sync is on our website too. So thank you very much for watching. So if there are any questions, now's your time. Lots of people happy to see this, so that's good. No questions. Awesome. Okay, well, if anything comes to anyone's mind after this webinar, we're on email and all those places, so feel free to give us a shout. So thank you very much for watching. Until the 6th of April. Thanks all. Goodbye.